Hey folks, good evening. I wonder where in the city you're curled up right now. Tonight we're going to step into an old time hidden in the patterns of wooden clogs. The wind, rain, and snow of the Edo period will wrap around your nerves gently like soft cotton. Before you get ready to relax, if you think this kind of night is worth keeping, feel free to give a like and hit subscribe, but only if you truly like these stories, of course. I'm also really curious to know which city you're in right now and what time the clock on your wall is pointing to. Feel free to leave a comment and tell me as if we're in the same room, softly exchanging our time coordinates with each other. Now slowly dim the lights in your room a bit, just enough, so that you can see the lines on your fingertips. If you have a small fan nearby, go ahead and turn it on. Let that gentle rustling sound be the first background note of our story. Are you ready? Then let's step into tonight's story together, treading on the wooden clogs of time. The water clock ticks away as you sit under the veranda, laugh, oiling your geta. The moon outside has just climbed up the treetops. Laugh, its so clear glow, just falling on the geta's surface like a sprinkle of fine salt. This is a habit you developed after becoming a Geisha, starting to maintain your geta every day. At the third quarter of the early morning, just a little later than the second knock of the night watchman, and just a little earlier than the kitchen begins preparing breakfast. So laugh, Sister Examachum says, the air at this hour is the weak, clean estically. Laugh, the dew has just dried up, the moisture lingers, and the wood's pores are slightly open, just like a person who has just woken up opening their mouth to yawn. It is the easiest time for the oil to be absorbed. You once tried maintaining them at noon when the sun made the geta hot. The tongue oil applied was like being poured onto a hot pan, foam sizzling full with like small bubbles and failing to seep in at all. In the end, you had to wipe it off with a cloth and reapply, wasting half a can of good oil. The flower street is so quiet at this early hour that you can hear your own breathing. From afar comes a few coughs of the night watchman, and nearby the sound of night dew dripping from the eaves. Sonic tap, tap, tap on the stone slabs, just as if keeping time with your movements. The strength with which you wipe the get rises and falls with this rhythm, just a little faster, just a little slower, just enough to chase away the fine dust. Sister Chiayo says, this is the weak sound, listening maintenance method Kistinets passed down by the old Dishishas. Working to the rhythm of nature makes the wood more weak, so obedience. Preparation work must be done at midnight, just like the night before. Take the tongue oil out of the storage room and warm it slowly in warm water to bring it to the most suitable consistency by the early hour. Too cold, it becomes like solidified honey and cannot be spread. Too hot, it becomes too thin and cannot cling to the wood. The first time you did it, you failed to control the temperature, like warming the tongue oil just too much. As a result, it flowed down the geta like water just dripping along the teeth onto the tatami mat, leaving a string of amber marks that took a long time to clean up. The light during maintenance also matters. You must not light a too bright lamp, as it will dazzle and make it hard to see the wood grain, nor should it be too dark. Or maybe just small cracks will be missed. You use a small Celadon lamp with a short wick, the light just enough to illuminate a corner of the geta. Just like gilding the wood with a layer of gold. You always love staring at the wood grain under the lamplight. Laugh, those patterns of varying depths are just like rivers, like tree branches, like the stone paths you have walked. Staring at them, you often zone out until Sister Ixochun's cough just pulls you back. Laugh. The wind, at this early hour, carries the cold of dew, making your hands a little icy. After applying the oil, you just tuck your hands into your sleeves to warm them before continuing to wipe the next sort of get. The geta seemed particularly quiet at this hour, unlike during the day when they always loved toast talking. You're just soaking clapless and walking thin as electronic when hitting a stone. At this moment, they lie quietly in front of you, letting you wipe them with a cloth and stroke them with your fingertips like literally docile kitten. Once you got up late and started maintaining the geta at the 5th hour of the morning, having just barely wiped them a few times, you heard the sound of a guest's footsteps outside and just hurriedly hid the geta in the cabinet. The geta were not properly maintained that day, and in the afternoon, while accompanying the guest for a walk, the teeth made a creaker sound, as if complaining about not having enough sleep. Sister Kyochun later said daily geta have tempers too. If you neglect them, they will just cause you trouble. By the time you finish maintaining the geta, the sky is just starting to lighten. So when you put them back in the storage room, you can actually hear the first bird song from afar. The tongue oil on the geta glows like softly in the morning light, like wrapped in a layer of morning mist. You just touch the cool surface of the geta and suddenly feel that the time spent in this early hour was not wasted. Those moments spent in silence, those focused wipes and applications have made these geta more like a part of you. Just carrying your breath, your patience, accompanying you to greet a new day. Your fingers pause over the geta teeth, and the tongue oil on the cotton cloth drips down the wood grain, leaving a wavy mark like a tadpole. Laugh. This is the first time you've tried to repair worn geta teeth, and the copper sheets on the tips have been polished so thin by the stone slabs, showing a faint yellowish color like old brass coins. Laugh. Sister Chayao says that replacing geta teeth is like daily healing, like a wound on the geta chair. You have to be careful not to let the wood split when prying off the old copper sheets. The first time you did it, you were too eager and used a small chisel to wedge in, which made a crack in the corner of the get tooth. Like a whole, broken fingernail. You were so anxious that you almost cried, but Sister Roxo-chun just took some wood powder and mixed it with tongue oil to fill it in. Gerwood is just like skin when, like she said, while smoothing the filling a small scar will fade away after careful care daily. Laugh. So the new copper sheets are cut from last winter's stock with a thickness of 3 coins stacked together, too thin, and they wear out quickly, too thick. Laugh. And they make the geta so heavy to walk in. You use small scissors to trim the edges into an arc following the curve of the geta teeth, just like tailoring a piece of clothing to fit the body. The copper sheets shine in the light, and when you tap them gently with your fingernail, they make a clearance like delity, just like a wind chime. Hammering in the copper nails requires more skill.
You just hold the small hammer in your right hand and steady the nail with your left thumb and index finger, tapping so lightly, at first to set the nail, then gradually increasing the force.
The sound must be even like hold, tap, tap, tap. See, not too fast or too slow. Laugh. If you hit too hard, the wood will split. If too soft, the nail won't hold. Sister Chayao. Once timed your hammering with a water clock, saying that the rhythm of a good repair should actually match the sound of the water dripping. After replacing the copper sheets, you have to polish them with the finest sandpaper. Laugh. The paper is as soft as silk, and you just rub it back and forth along the edges, making the junction of copper and wood smooth. Laugh. So that when you run your finger over it, you can't feel where the copper ends and the wood just begins. You once forgot to polish, and the rough edge scratched your tubby sock. The next day, leaving a small red mark on your toe like a drop of blood. The most important step is to apply tongue oil around the new copper sheets. You just dip a bamboo stick in the oil, and painted along the gap between the copper and the wood, repeating it 3 times to ensure no moisture can seep in. Laugh, sonic water is the gatta's worst enemy. Download Sister Chun often says, if water gets into the cracks, the wood will rot from the inside out, just like a tooth with a cavity. Laugh so daily. Now the repaired getta teeth glint in the light, so the new copper sheets a bright contrast to the darkened wood, like a new patch on an old garment. You place the getta on the tatami and tap the teeth lightly with your knuckle. The sound is solid and clear, without the hollow rattle of just before. Outside the veranda, a first crow of the rooster echoes, and you suddenly feel that these getta, with their new copper tips, are just like soldiers putting on new armor, just ready to accompany you through the bustling streets again. The getta laugh strayed at the knot, the silk threads playing like a bird's nest. Laugh, you just spread out the repair tools on the low table, a needle threaded with dark purple silk, a small pair of scissors with a tortoiseshell handle, and a thimble made of like polished bone. Mending straps is more delicate work than oiling the wood, requiring the kind of patience needed for embroidering cherry blossoms on a kind of kimono sleeve. Sister XXO Chun taught you to first soak the frayed end in warm water twice. Silk is like hair daily. She said dabbing the strap with a damp cloth, ling like a little moisture, just makes it soft and easy to manage. So black you, let the water seep in for 3 breaths, then gently comb the loose threads, straight with a bamboo needle, just like untangling a knot in hair.
Rushing this step once made you pull a thread too hard, snapping it off short, and you had to start over with a new section of silk.
The needle must enter the strap at a 45-degree laugh angle too steep, and it would pierce through to the other side, leaving unsightly holes to laugh so shallow, and the stitch wouldn't just hold. You just press the thimble against the needle's head, pushing it through with a soft pop-drew laugh sound, then brought it laugh back up half a thread's width away, creating like a line of tiny stitches like a row of ants. Sister Chayo said each stitch should be the same length as a grain of rice, laugh like uncut any longer, and they'd loosen any shorter, and they'd bunch up. Matching the thread color was a lesson learned the hard way once you used indigo instead of purple, thinking they looked exactly the same in dim light. The next day, while walking through the tea house garden, the sunlight caught the repair, making it stand out like a bruise. Laugh, the guest you were accompanying, noticed and said, "Guy, even so small flaws shine brighter than the rest when they're out of place." Dean, laugh. You went back and redid the whole entire mend that night. After mending, you rubbed the knot between your palms to soften the silk. The warmth from your hands just made the threads settle into place, merging with the old fabric until the repair was so nearly invisible. You tested the strap by looping it over your thumb and pulling gently. It held so firm no give in the new stitches. Sister Aksaka-chan hung the geta on a bamboo peg to let the mend set, saying some silk remembers being mended anyway. Give it time to forget the break. Full. Now the strap lies smooth in your hand, the frayed spot healed into a faint line. Laugh, you tied into the usual bow of the knot. Laugh, sitting so neatly against the gattened surface like a folded fan. Outside, a sparrow lands on the veranda rail, tilting its head as if admiring your work. You just run a finger over the mend one last time. Laugh, feeling the subtle ridge of stitches. Just laugh, just sort of like laugh. A reminder that even broken things can be made whole again, often stronger for having been mended with care. A small crack snaked across the geta's surface, thin as a spider's thread, but deep enough to catch your fingernail. Laugh. Literally, you set the geta on a padded tray. Laugh, so the wood still carrying the coolness of the morning storage room. Laugh, mending cracks requires a steady hand and the right mixture of wood powder and tongue oil. like a recipe, Sister Chayo, compared to making medicine. Laugh, laugh. Unkind too much of one ingredient and the cure becomes harmful. First, you clean the crack with a horsehair brush, so its bristles stiff enough to dislodge dust, but soft enough not to widen the split. The brush has been in the storage room for years, so its handle worn smooth by generations of Geisha. You brush in short, gentle strokes, watching as tiny wood shavings and dirt fall onto the tray like scattered sesame seeds. Rushing this step once pushed a clump of dust deeper into the crack, just leaving a dark spot in the repaired wood that never actually faded. Laugh. So next comes mixing the filler. You scoop a pinch of cherry wood powder into a small ceramic dish, like laugh one matching the wood. Type ensures the repair blends in. Laugh unka, then add tongue oil drop by drop, stirring with a bamboo stick until it forms a paste the consistency of thick miso. Too runny and it will drip out of the crack. Too thick and it won't seep into the deepest parts. You test it just by lifting the stick. Laugh. So the paste should cling in a slow, steady stream, not break abruptly or run like water. Laugh. Applying the filler demands patience. You use a small spatula made of ox bone. Its edge rounded from years of use to really push the paste into the crack. The bone laugh tool won't scratch the wood. Unlike metal, which leaves tiny marks that show through the finish, you just work in layers, letting each thin coat seep in before adding more, just like building a bridge stone by laugh stone. Laugh, Sister Executions. This method makes the repair stronger than the surrounding wood daily. Laugh, since you're giving the crack more attention than the tree ever did when it really grew. After filling, you let the paste dry for 3 days, placing the geta in a cool corner away from sunlight and drafts. The first time you tried to speed up drying by setting it near like a lamp, the filler shrank unevenly. So, leaving a depression you had to fix with another layer. Now you mark the drying period on a paper calendar, so crossing off each day with a brush stroke, turning patience into a visible ritual. Once dry, you sand the repair with the finest sandpaper, folding the sheet into a small square to reach the tightest spots. Laugh, the paper makes a softest shushnik sound against the wood. Laugh as you work, just gradually smoothing the surface until your fingertips can't detect where the crack ended and the filler just began. You finish with a cloth dipped in tongue oil. Laugh, rubbing in small circles to blend the repair into the surrounding wood. Laugh like the oil, making the whole grain of the new paste match the old wood's pattern. Laugh, the geta now sits on the veranda, the repaired crack. Visible. Laugh only if you know where to look. Laugh, so one thin line that catches the light differently on rainy days. So like a memory made visible. You tap it gently with like a knuckle. The sound is solid, no hollow echo, like that would mean a weak repair. A butterfly lands on the edge, so its wings brushing the wood, as if inspecting your work, and you smile, remembering that even the most careful repairs leave a trace, a reminder of how things once broke and were made whole again. The rain seeped into the geta's core, making the wood swell until the edges felt slightly spongy. Laugh just like a soaked sponge. Laugh, you laid them on a bamboo rack in the corner of the storage room where the air was so dry but not too harsh, as Sister Chiayo had instructed. Drying wet geta requires balance, like just, like frost. Oh, like so much heat in the wood cracks, too little air, and mold takes hold. A lesson you learned the hard way after leaving a pair near the hearth last winter. First, you just blot the surface with rice paper, pressing gently to absorb moisture without rubbing, which would damage the tongue oil finish. The paper comes in thin sheets, so each one absorbing a little more water until it no longer wrinkles when pressed against the wood. Laugh, you change sheets like every quarter hour, watching as the damp spots shrink from dark splotches to faint shadows. Laugh like clouds clearing from the sky. Rushing this step once by using so thick paper caused uneven drying, leaving a permanent warped spot on the Ganazet. Next, you prop the Geta at a 30-degree angle against the wall, their soles facing the open window. The draft must hit them indirectly. So you just hang like a thin cotton curtain in the window to soften the airflow. So direct wind would dry the outer layers too quickly, trapping moisture inside like a storm held captive in a jar. You check the angle with a small wooden level, its edges marked with notches from years of use, ensuring both get a stand evenly to prevent like warping. Every 3 hours, you just rotate the geta so each side receives equal air. The process turns into a quiet ritual marking time between other chores like just kept preparing the morning tea before arranging the evening flower. You run your hand over the wood each time, noting how the spongy texture gradually firms up. How the weight lightens as water evaporates. Sister ML Chun said wood remembers being wet daily, so you must treat it gently. Like comforting someone who's caught a so chill daily. After 2 days, you test the moisture with a strand of dry straw, rubbing it lightly over the surface. You listen for the faint scratch that indicates dryness. A smooth sound means more like drying is always needed. The first time you thought a pear was ready too soon, you applied tung oil that turned cloudy, trapped moisture, creating a milky film that took like weeks to dissipate. Now you wait until the straw scratch sounds clear and crisp, just like stepping on dry leaves. Once fully dry, you apply a thin coat of fresh tung oil, using a soft cloth to work it into the wood in circular motions. The oil sinks in differently than usual, so the wood drinking it in greedily after its long soak. You let it sit for an hour, then wipe away the excess with a clean cloth, revealing a deeper, richer grain than before. The Geta look renewed, their surface glowing with a warmth that comes from careful tending, just like skin after a fever breaks. Now, the Geta stand on the veranda, their wood firm and smooth under your fingers. You just tap them together lightly, the sound clear and bright. No muffled notes that would signal lingering moisture. A dragonfly hovers nearby, its wings catching the sunlight, and you think of how water can both harm and heal. So untouched. Too much brings rot, but the right care after wetness can make wood stronger, more resilient. These Geta will carry the memory of the rain in their grain, a silent reminder of survival and care. Mold had bloomed on the Geta's soul, just like a patch of white fuzz that spread like a silent snowfall. You set it on a slatted rack in the sun, but kept it in the shade. And direct sunlight would warp the wood while failing to kill the spores. Removing mold requires both thoroughness and gentleness. Sister Zaxon always said, because rushing leaves hidden traces that will always return. First, you mix a solution of vinegar and water in a small earthen bowl, so the ratio precise 3 parts water to 1 part vinegar, so measured by the same small cup used for tea. The acid kills the mold without harming the wood, unlike harsher cleaners that leach color from the grain. You once used undiluted vinegar in a hurry, and the wood turned pale as bone, just like a mistake that took months of oiling to disguise. A bamboo brush with stiff bristles is your tool, so its tips trimmed to a sharp point to reach into the crevices between the Geta's teeth. You scrub in circular motions, watching the mold dissolve into the liquid like sugar in tea. Each stroke must reach the deepest part of the growth, for any remaining spore will wake again when the wood gets damp. You rinse the brush frequently in clean water, squeezing out the dark liquid until it runs so clear, a process that takes longer than just the scrubbing itself. After scrubbing, you pat the wood dry with a linen cloth, pressing firmly but not rubbing. Friction would open the wood's pores, making it more susceptible to future mold. The cloth absorbs the moisture, leaving the surface only slightly damp like a stone. After morning dew, you then set the get on the rack again, turning it every hour so all sides dry evenly, like a rotation that mirrors the way laundered kimonos are just hung to dry. Once completely dry, you inspect every inch with a magnifying glass borrowed from the optician in the market. The glass reveals what the eye misses: tiny black specks that are like mold roots clinging to the wood, like stubborn secrets. You scrape these away with a bamboo splinter, its edge shaved so thin as a blade, working until the glass shows only clean, unmarked wood. The final step is a light coat of tung oil applied with a soft cloth in the direction of the grain. The whole oil seals like the wood's pores, creating a barrier against moisture while nourishing the fiber. You use less than usual, for too much oil would trap any remaining moisture, defeating the whole purpose. The oil sinks in so quickly, leaving the wood with a matte finish that will shine again after a few days of wear. Now the Geisha stands on the rack, its soul clean and fragrant with vinegar and wood. You just run a hand over it, feeling like the texture of the grain more clearly than before, as if the mold had polished the surface in its own way. A breeze from the garden carries the scent of chrysanthemums, and you think of Sister Chio's words. Drawn, laugh, mold teaches us that even what seems dirty holds a lesson. It just reminds us to pay attention to the places we don't see. The Geisha's wooden peg had worn unevenly, one side ground down to a slant like a crescent moon. You propped it on a padded vitsi, the wood groaning softly under the gentle pressure. Adjusting pegs requires the same precision, as tuning a shamisen sister exenochun, often said for even a hair's breadth of difference, just changes how the Geisha sounds when walking.
They start by marking the high spots with a pencil made from willow charcoal. The soft black glide lines show where the wood needs trimming, creating a map of the whole wear pattern.
The first time you skipped marking, you sanded too much from one side, making the peg wobble like a drunkard. Now you trace the ideal curve first, So sort of like just laugh on a shallow arc that mirrors the original shape, uncuff before touching any tools to the wood. A small plane with a blade sharp enough to shave paper is your main tool. You hold it at like a 10-degree angle to the wood, pushing in short, even like strokes that produce curls of shavings as fine as confetti. The blade must stay parallel to the marked line, for any deviation creates a flat spot that will wear unevenly. You stop just after every 3 strokes to check progress, running a finger along the curve to feel for inconsistencies like the eye might miss. Between planing sessions, you test the Geisha by setting it on a level stone, so if it rocks, you mark the culprit spot with more charcoal. If it stands so firm, you blow away the shavings to admire the emerging shape. This, back, and so forth. Rhythm, unwork, check, adjust, Like unca was the hardest part to learn, you once rushed to finish before a rainstorm, and the uneven peg made your kimono hem drag in mud during the evening procession, a lesson in patience etched into your memory. Once the curve is right, you switch to sandpaper wrapped around a wooden block, the rigid backing ensuring an even finish. The sandpaper makes a soft rasping sound as it smooths the wood, gradually turning the rough surface into something just as silky as just polished jade. You work in the direction of the grain, following the natural lines of the wood like a river follows its course, until the peg feels so warm under your fingers from the friction. The final step is to rub the peg with beeswax, melting a small amount on your palm before working it into the wood. The wax fills tiny pores and creates a barrier against moisture, making the wood just resist wear. So long, you buff it with a cloth until it glows faintly. Machine highlighting the curve you've created. Laugh. So Sister Chayo said this waxing is like offering a prayer to the wood, asking it to hold its shape just a little longer. Now the geta stands perfectly level on the stone. No hint of the wobble that once annoyed you with every step. You lift it and let it fall gently onto the stone. So the sound is like a single clear like stud, fom didida, instead of the uneven jur clatterson before. A gecko scurries across the veranda, pausing to eye the gat as if appreciating the repair, and you smile, remembering that balanced laugh. Sort of like just laugh, like a you or in wood or in life. Laugh, uncut, requires not just skill, but the willingness to check and adjust again and again until everything lines up just right. The gata's wooden peg had loosened, wobbling like a tooth ready to fall out. Laugh. You just laid it on a padded workbench. Laugh. The peg's hole showing signs of wear. Laugh. Oval instead of round. Its edges just smoothed by years of shifting. Replacing a peg requires understanding how wood moves. So Sister Aixa-chan often said, for a peg that fits today might bind tomorrow if the humidity changes first. So you remove the old peg using a pair of curved pliers, wrapped in cloth to avoid marring the wood. The pliers grip gently but firmly, twisting slightly as you pull, a motion like extracting a seed from a fruit. The first time you tried this, you pulled too hard and split the surrounding wood, leaving a crack that needed filling before you could proceed. Now you rock the peg, back and forth, slowly feeling for the moment when it releases, just like a door latch, like giving way. Selecting a new peg is a pretty careful process. Laugh, you rummage through a wooden box of spares, each cut from different woods. Laugh, uncut cherry for flexibility, oak for strength, pine for lightness. This get needs cherry, Sister Chayo advised, because it bears weight unevenly. Laugh, when walking, you choose a peg slightly thicker than the worn hole, so its surface smooth, but not polished so it will grip the wood as it's tapped. Laugh in. Sanding the peg to fit is done by hand using a strip of fine sandpaper wrapped around a bamboo stick. You rotate the whole peg as you sand, checking the hole fit frequently by inserting it halfway into the hole. It should resist slightly when turned like a key in a well-made lock, too loose, and it will wobble too tight, and the wood might split when hammered. You just blow away the wood dust, watching it settle on the bench just like a sprinkle of cinnamon. Before inserting, you rub the peg with a thin layer of beeswax, so it's like honey scent mixing with the wood's aroma. Laugh. The wax acts as both lubricant and sealant, making insertion easier. Laugh, while preventing moisture from seeping into the joint. You tap the peg in with a small mallet, covered in felt, the sound soft and muffled, counting each tap. like just sort of trite, gentle strikes, no more, no less, as Sister Aixa-chan taught you. Once seated, you trim the excess peg with a sawtooth file, working slowly to avoid splinters. The file makes the softest crunch holds laugh sound as it cuts through the wood, and you brush away the shavings with a feathered duster, revealing the peg's end flush with the get's surface. A final sanding with silk paper smooths, like any sort of rough edges, laugh, making the repair invisible to the eye. Now the gata stands firm, no wobble when you rock it back and forth. You press down hard on the peg with your thumb so it doesn't laugh budge, a silent testament to the whole fit. Laugh outside, laugh, a carpenter's hammer echoes from the street, a rhythm that matches the taps you gave the peg earlier. You run a hand over the repaired area, feeling only the continuous curve of the wood, and smile laugh like cause some of the best repairs are those that disappear completely, letting the object speak for itself. The gita's insole had worn thin, developing a hole at the heel that felt like a small stone underfoot. You laid it on a tatami mat, laughed, the fabric frayed at the edges where it had rubbed against the wood for years. Replacing an insole is like giving the geta new shoes, like Sister Chayo said. For laugh, it just carries the weight of every step. First, you remove the old insole by prying up its edges with a bamboo spatula. The glue holding it in place has weakened with time, releasing with a soft, peeling sound, like lifting a dried leaf from a stone. You work slowly around the perimeter, avoiding tearing the fabric. Laugh, on cue. Once rushed and left small bits stuck to the wood, which had to be scraped off with sandpaper, leaving faint marks. Choosing new fabric is just a matter of both function and beauty. You select a piece of indigo dyed cotton from the storage chest, so it's weaved tight enough to resist wear but soft enough to mold to the foot. The color matches the Getta's lacquer, a deep blue that will fade gently with time rather than just clashing as it ages. Laugh, Sister Exanachin, taught you to feel the fabric's density by pinching it between thumb and finger. Laugh, just sort of laugh, sort of too loose, and it won't cushion the step. So cutting the insole requires tracing the old one as a template, but you just add a fraction of an inch to all sides. This extra allowance ensures a snug fit after the first few wears. When the fabric compresses slightly, you use sharp fabric scissors with curved blades, cutting in smooth, continuous strokes to avoid jagged edges that might fray the first time you cut corners. So the insole shifted after a week, creating a wrinkle that just rubbed against the heel. Applying the new glue is done with a small brush made from rabbit hair. Its soft bristles spreading the adhesive evenly without actually leaving streaks. You apply a thin layer to both the wood and the fabric's back, then wait until it becomes tacky. Laugh. So laugh about the time it takes to recite a short poem, rushing to attach it while the glue is still wet, creates bubbles which turn into uncomfortable lumps underfoot. Pressing the insole into place requires a clean cloth wrapped around a wooden block. You work from the center outward, pushing firmly to eliminate air pockets. Your movements slow and deliberate, like smoothing, like a bedsheet. You pay special attention to the edges, just holding them down with your fingertips for a full minute to ensure they bond properly. After the glue dries overnight, you trim any excess fabric with small scissors, following the Getta's curved edge so precisely that the insole looks like it just grew there. A final dusting with talcum powder. Laugh keeps the fabric from sticking to itself. Leaving a soft powdery scent that mingles with the wood's aroma. Now the dicta rests on the veranda, so its new insole, deep blue and smooth as a still lake. And you slip your foot into it, feeling the perfect fit. No hint of the hole that just once bothered you. A breeze stirs the bamboo curtain, casting dappled light on the fabric, and you think of how the insole, though hidden, makes every step easier. So just laugh, just a reminder that some of the most important work is done where no one else sees. The Getta's bamboo reinforcement had split, a thin crack running lengthwise that made the frame feel so fragile when lifted. You propped it against a wooden stand, the split edge catching the light like a silver thread. Mending bamboo requires understanding its nature. Sister Ixio Truan said, uncut bamboo bends but resists, so force will only break it further. First, you clean the split with a cotton swab dipped in rubbing alcohol, removing dust and resin that would prevent the repair from just holding. The swab comes away, yellowed, carrying decades of accumulated grime from between the bamboo fibers. You work carefully around the crack, which splinters into tiny branches like a river delta, each needing attention, rushing. This step once left, debris trapped in the repair, creating a weak spot that would probably split within a month. Next, you prepare a mixture of bamboo powder and epoxy resin, stirring them in a small bowl until they form a paste the color of dry grass. The ratio must be precise. So 2 parts resin to 1 part powder, measured with the same small spoons used for just tea, Laugh, too much powder makes the paste like brittle, too little, and it won't fill the crack properly. Laugh, you test its consistency by letting it drip from the spoon. Laugh, sort of like unca, it should fall in thick, slow blobs, not runny stream. Applying the paste requires a toothpick, so its tip sharpened to a fine point to reach the deepest parts of the split. You work the paste into the crack in layers, letting each coat settle before adding more. So like filling a well with stone. The first layer seeps into the tiniest crevices, subsequent layers build strength. You just wear a thin cotton glove on your working hand to avoid getting resin on your skin. So a lesson learned when you once spent days scrubbing sticky residue from your finger. After felling, you wrap the bamboo with cotton thread, winding it so tightly around the repaired area to hold the split closed as the resin cures. The thread must be pulled snug, but not so tight that it distorts the bamboo shape. Laugh like a balance you learned by practicing on discarded pieces. Laugh, you tie the ends with a surgeon's knot, which won't loosen as the resin shrinks slightly during drying. The guitar rests in a warm, dry corner for 3 days while the resin sets you check on it, so daily, gently, pressing the bamboo to test for give. On the 3rd day, the repair feels so firm, no movement when squeezed. You snip the thread with small scissors. The cut ends fraying slightly as they release their hold. Sanding the repair with just fine sandpaper removes excess resin, revealing a surface that follows the bamboo's natural curve. Laugh, you work in circular motions. Laugh, gradually blending the repair into the surrounding wood until your fingers can't actually detect the joint. A final rub. Laugh with tongue oil brings out the bamboo's natural color, making the repair nearly invisible. Just like a slight change in grain pattern that only you would notice. Laugh. Now the geta stands firm, so its bamboo frame strong again when you lift it. You tap the repaired area with a fingernail. The sound is solid, no hollow ring that would indicate a pretty weak spot. Outside, a bamboo flute plays in the distance. Laugh, its melody matching the rhythm of your breaths as you admire your work. Laugh, you realize that mending bamboo is just like mending resolve. Laugh, so uncouth strength comes not from hiding the break, but from making it part of the structure. The metal clasp on the geta had tarnished, its once bright surface turning a dull gray that clashed with the polished wood. You just laid it on a felt pad. Laugh, the clasp so intricate floral pattern nearly obscured by oxidation. Laugh, cleaning metal requires both strength and gentleness. Laugh, sister, Chiat said. Laugh so untoo harsh and you'll damage the design. Too timid and the tarnish remain. First, you mix a paste of baking soda and lemon juice in a small dish, like the fizzing reaction, releasing tiny bubbles that help lift the tarnish. The ratio is 2 parts soda to 1 part juice. Enough to form a thick paste that clings to the metal without dripping. So you once used the vinegar instead of lemon, which left a pungent smell that lingered in the wood despite repeated cleaning. Applying the paste requires a soft, bristled toothbrush. Laugh, its head small enough to reach into the clasp's decorative crevices. Laugh, so you work in gentle circular motions, just focusing on the most tarnished areas first, where the metal has turned almost black. The paste turns gray as it absorbs oxidation like a sponge soaking up water. So, you rinse the brush, frequently wiping away the dirty paste. You check your progress. After letting the paste sit for the time it takes to count to 100, you just wipe it away with a damp cloth, revealing patches of bright metal beneath. Some areas require a second application, especially the tiny spaces between the flower petals of the design. So you use a cotton swab to apply the paste to these tight spots, just twirling it gently to reach every surface. Polishing the clasp to a shine is done with a piece of chamois leather, its soft surface, just buffing the metal without scratching. You rub in small, quick circles, feeling like the leather warm against your fingers as friction builds. The metal gradually glows, first like a dull sheen, then like a bright sparkle that catches the light. You pay special attention to the edges of the design, where tarnish often hides, until the entire clasp shines uniformly.
To protect the metal from future tarnishing, so you apply a thin coat of clear wax with a soft cloth, rubbing it in until only a faint film remains.
The wax creates a barrier against moisture and dirt, preserving the shine longer. You let it dry for an hour, then buff it lightly with another piece of leather to remove any excess, so leaving the metal so smooth and slippery to the touch. Now the clasp leans against the Getta's wood lath, so its floral pattern is clearly visible once more, like a flower blooming after rain. You fasten and unfasten it a few times, laugh, so enjoying the smooth click of metal against metal. Outside, the sun reflects off a nearby pond, so it's light, matching the sparkle of the clasp. Laugh, you realize that cleaning metal is like polishing character, so unkit requires effort to remove the dullness, but the result reveals the beauty that was there all along.
Laugh the Getta's wooden heel had worn unevenly, slanting to one side like a leaning tower. You placed it on a flat stone, spinning it gently to see how far it wobbled. Laugh just like so on a full quarter turn before stopping, a sign that the wear was significant.
Straightening a heel requires the precision of a calligrapher, Sister Aksakachun said, for even like a fraction of an inch makes a difference in how it feels to walk. First, you mark the high points with a piece of white chalk. Left the powdery lines, showing where the wood needs to be sanded. Left the whole marks form a small circle on the heel's edge, so like a tiny target. You once skipped marking and sanded so blindly, removing too much wood from one side and making the wobble worse. Laugh, now you check the marks repeatedly, spinning the gut to ensure they're so accurate. Laugh. Sanding. Laugh. The heel is done with a block of wood, wrapped in medium grit sandpaper. Laugh. The rigid surface, ensuring even removal. You just work in small controlled circles, focusing on the marked areas, and stop so frequently. To test the Getta's balance, placing it on the stone, you press down gently on each corner, feeling for any sort of unevenness. Laugh. The process is slow. Laugh, like just unhurried, like shaping a stone into a sphere, each stroke bringing it closer to perfect roundness. Laugh. After the worst of the unevenness is corrected, you just switch to fine grit sandpaper, wrapping it around a sponge to follow the heel's curve. The sponge allows more flexibility, smoothing the surface without creating flat-like spots. Laugh. The sandpaper makes a soft-shell whispering years hold against the wood, gradually refining the texture until it feels as smooth as polished jade. You just blow away the wood dust, watching it just float in the sunlight like tiny golden specks. Checking the balance becomes a ritual. Spin, stop, adjust, repeat, laugh. You place a small level on the Getta's surface. Laugh. Its bubble floating left and right, just as you make tiny adjustment. When the bubble finally centers, you let out a breath like you didn't realize you were holding. Laugh. A small celebration of precision achieved. Laugh. So Sister Chaito would say this moment is when the Gettanesep finds its footing again. The final step is a coat of tung oil applied with a cotton ball in small circular motions. Laugh. The oil soaks into the newly sanded wood more quickly than the rest of the Getta. Laugh, darkening it slightly before blending in. You let it dry overnight, then buff it with a soft cloth to a subtle shine, so that won't make the heel so slippery. Now the Getta stands steady on the stone, no wobble. When spun, its heel even and true. You slip it on and take just a few steps. Laugh, feeling the difference immediately. Laugh. Yunka's solid, balanced gait that makes walking seem effortless. Outside, a bamboo stalk sways in the breeze, straight and true. And you think of how both bamboo and Getta teach the same lesson. so strength comes from standing evenly. So, with all parts in harmony. The Gita's painted design had faded, the once vibrant cherry blossoms, now pale smudges that barely resembled flowers. You just set it on a low table, comparing it to a new Gita with the same pattern, laugh just like uncouth's pink petals and brown branches, a stark contrast to your warm one. Laugh, restoring paint requires not just skill, but memory. Sister Chayo said, for you must recall how the colors once looked. First, you clean the surface with a soft brush, removing dust that has settled in the cracks of the design. The brush strokes are so gentle, like sweeping fallen petals from a tatami mat. To avoid scratching exactly what little paint remains, you then wipe it with a cloth, laugh, dampened in distilled water, laugh, which won't react with the old pigments, unlike tap water that actually contains mineral. Matching the colors is probably the most challenging part. You mix pigments in small porcelain dishes, white and red for the blossoms, adding a tiny drop of yellow to actually capture the warmth of sunlight on petals. For the branches, you blend black and brown, lightening it with a touch of gray to match the faded wood. Laugh, so you test each mixture on a scrap of wood, letting it dry completely. Laugh before comparing, sort of just until dries darker than it looks wet. Laugh, a lesson learned when your first attempt resulted in overly bright petals. Applying the paint requires a fine brush with only 3 hairs, so it's tipped sharp enough to outline the thin branches. So you start with the outlines, following the faint traces of the original design, like a guide. The brush moves in short, steady strokes, pausing after each one to check the shape. You work so slowly, completing one petal before moving to the next, just like building a flower one petal at a time. After the outlines dry, you fill in the petals with a slightly larger brush, layering the paint in thin coats. Laugh, each coat is allowed to dry before adding the next, creating depth that mimics the original design's dimension. You leave a tiny white highlight on each petal, just as the new get has to catch the light and make them look like 3, laugh, just dimensional. Once the paint dries overnight, you seal it with a thin coat of clear lacquer applied with a soft cloth in circular motions. The lacquer not only protects the new paint, but also blends it with the old wood, so making the repair look natural. You let it dry for 2 days, during which you just cover the geta with a paper bag to keep out dust. Laugh, now the geta's blossoms glow again, their pink hues soft but vivid, the branches sturdy and defined. The new paint doesn't completely hide the old laugh, sort of like laugh UV break chicken. It shows through slightly at the edges. Like a memory made visible, you hold it up to the light, watching how the highlights on the petals catch the sun and smile. A guest admires it, saying, "Star, the flowers look like they've bloomed again." Laugh, star, you like nod. Laugh, understanding that some things can be made new without just erasing their history. The geta's wooden heel had worn unevenly, one side ground down more than the other, making each step feel like walking on a slope. You placed it on a level workbench, the tilt obvious even to the eye, a small block needed under the higher side to make it stand straight. Laugh, evening uneven heels is just like balancing scales, like Sister Isaac Delchun said. Laugh, like uncut precision, ensures harmony in every movement. First, you mark the high spots with a piece of chalk, dusting the heel lightly to make the lines visible. The chalk shows where the wood needs to be removed, so a map of correction that guides your work. You use a small sharp plane with a wooden handle, its blade honed to a fine edge that shaves wood in thin curls. The first time you tried this without marking, you just removed too much from one area, creating like a new wobble that was worse than the original. Planing requires steady pressure and a consistent angle, like your arm moving in smooth arcs that follow the heel's curve. Laugh, each pass of the plane removes a thin layer of wood, like the curls falling to the bench like small ribbon. You check progress frequently by placing a straight edge across the heel, measuring the gap with a thin strip of paper. Laugh, sort of laugh, like laugh or unco. When the paper no longer slides under, the surface is level. So after planing, you smooth the surface with sandpaper, starting with the medium grit to remove tool marks, then switching to fine to create a finish as smooth as polished stone.
So the sandpaper makes a soft rasping sound, and you work in the direction of the wood grain to avoid leaving crosswise scratches that would catch dirt. You blow away the wood dust, revealing the sort of fresh, pale wood beneath the worn surface. To protect the newly planed area, you apply 3 thin coats of tung oil, letting each dry completely before adding the next. The oil so darkens the wood slightly, matching the color of the surrounding heel, and creates a really hard, water-resistant finish. You rub each coat in with a soft cloth using circular motions that help the oil penetrate the wood's pores. Laugh like a process that makes the heel more resistant to future wear. Laugh. Once the final coat is dry, you test the geta by placing it on the level bench. like no rocking, no tilt, just a steady, like firm stance. You press down on the heel with your thumb. It feels solid, with no give. That would indicate weakness. You slip your foot into the geta, laugh, taking a few steps across the tatami. Laugh like uncut. Each step feels balanced. The heels striking the floor with a uniformic tap that echoes so evenly in the room. Now the geta stands ready by the door, its heel restored to perfect balance. You run a hand over the repaired area, feeling the smooth surface that blends so seamlessly with the rest of the heel. Just outside, a Geisha passes by in her own geta, the even rhythm of her steps matching the potential of your repaired pair. Laugh, you smile, understanding that balance. Laugh, just like unkoi, whether in geta or in life. Laugh comes from careful attention to the small inequalities that throw us off course. The geta's toe guard had come loose, so the small wooden piece hanging by a single thread of sinew that frayed with every movement. Laugh, you set it on a piece of felt. Laugh, the guard's carved edges, worn so smooth from years of bumping against stones and threshold. Attaching a toe guard is like securing a shield. Sister Child said, laugh. Like unko, its purpose is protection, but it must move with the geta, not against it. First, you carefully remove the remaining sinew, unwinding it slowly to avoid tearing the wood where it's still attached. The sinew, once strong as wire, crumbles in your fingers, just like dry straw. Laugh, a sign like it has outlived its purpose. You clean the grooves where the sinew ran with a toothpick, dislodging bits of dirt and old adhesive so that would prevent a secure bond. Rushing this step once left debris trapped, and the guard came loose again within just a week. You select a new piece of deer sinew from a small leather pouch, its fibers white and pliable. Soaking it in warm water for a quarter hour makes it flexible. So easy to thread through the small holes in the geta and guard. The first time you used dry sinew, it just snapped when you pulled it tight, leaving you to start over with a pretty fresh piece. Threading the sinew requires a steady hand and a thin needle. Its eye just large enough to accommodate the fiber, but small enough to pass through the pre-drilled holes. You just weave it in a figure 8 pattern, crisscrossing between geta and guard to create a strong, flexible joint. Laugh. Each pull must be firm but not tight. Laugh. So laugh. So laugh. UV break. Uncut, too much tension would warp the wood. Too little would leave the guard loose. Sister X Samuel Chun taught you to test the tension by gently wiggling the guard, so it should move slightly like a leaf on a branch, but not shift position. Once the sinew is in place, you tie it off with a hidden knot inside the geta, where it won't just rub against the foot or catch on clothing. Laugh, the knot is small but secure, so a technique learned from watching fishermen tie their nets. Laugh, like just strength lies in simplicity. You trim the excess sinew with small scissors, leaving just enough to tuck into the hole where it will dry and harden into a solid plug. To protect the repair, you apply a drop of beeswax to the knot, warming it with your fingertips until it melts and seals the fibers. So the wax prevents moisture from weakening the sinew, extending the whole life of the repair. You let it cool for a few minutes, then buff it gently,
with a cloth to remove any excess laugh, so leaving a smooth finish that won't catch on socks, laugh, or tap. Now the toe guard sits firmly in place, its carved design aligned perfectly with the getta's edge as it was when you tap it lightly with a fingernail, laugh. So it makes a pretty solid sound, no rattle that would indicate a loose fit, laugh. You slip your foot into the getta and walk across the room, feeling like the guard protect your toes with each step, just as it was meant to. Outside, a child runs past in get of their own, the sound of their toe guards tapping against the pavement, just matching the rhythm of your repaired pair. You smile, realizing that some of the most important repairs are the ones that go unnoticed, just simply doing their job to protect what matters. The gat's decorative inlay had fallen out, leaving a small empty recess where a mother-of-pearl cherry blossom laugh once shimmered. You place the getta on a velvet-lined tray, like the empty space looking like a missing tooth in a smile. Replacing inlays is like restoring a lost word in a poem. Laugh sister Chayo said, laugh. So their absence isn't destructive, but the whole feels incomplete without them. First, you clean the recess with a soft brush made from badger hair, so its bristles fine enough to reach into the tiny grooves without scratching the wood. The brush removes dust and bits of old adhesive that have hardened over time, leaving a smooth surface for the new inlay. So you once used a metal tool for this, which left faint scratches that showed through the new inlay, like a mistake that required careful polishing to hide. Selecting the replacement mother of pearl is a matter of matching both color and shape. You rummaged through a small wooden box filled with fragments, each piece shimmering with its own iridescence, like captured moonlight. You find a piece that curves naturally, its pinkish hue matching the original blossom's tone. Holding it up to the light, you check for flaws, laugh like unto, no cracks, no cloudiness. Laugh, just the perfect play of color that makes Mother Sew of Pearl unique. Cutting the inlay to fit requires a steady hand and a small, sharp knife with a curved blade. You trace the outline of the recess onto the mother of pearl with a pencil, then cut along the line in slow, deliberate strokes. The material is absolutely delicate, prone to chipping if rushed anyway, so you work with the patience of a calligrapher writing kanji. You test the fit frequently, trimming small bits until the inlay sits perfectly in the recess, like a puzzle piece finding its home. Applying the adhesive is done with a toothpick. Dabbing a tiny amount of fish glue into the recess. The glue is made from boiled fish bones, a sort of traditional adhesive that dries really clear and strong. Perfect for delicate work. You apply just enough to coat the surface without oozing out when the inlay can pressed in. Laugh. So laugh. Just like uncut, too much would leave visible residue. Too little would fail to hold the first time you used modern glue. It yellowed over time, ruining the appearance of the repair. Setting the inlay requires gentle pressure, so your thumb applying even just force across its surface for a full minute to ensure good contact with the glue. You wipe away any excess glue immediately. Laugh with a damp cloth. Then place a small weight. Laugh sort of like on a stone wrapped in silk. Laugh just like on top while it dries. The weight ensures the inlay sits flush with the getta's surface, no raised edges that would catch on socks or wear prematurely. After the glue dries overnight, you polish the inlay with a piece of soft felt, buffing it gently to bring out its natural luster. Laugh the mother of pearl shimmers in the light, its colors shifting from pink to blue as you move the get, recreating the effect of the original blossom. You run a fingernail over the edge. Laugh, just like laugh. Just like laugh, just laugh. UV break on no gap, no roughness, just the smooth transition from wood to inlay. Now the getta's design is complete again. the cherry blossom inlay shining like a small jewel against the wood. Laugh, you hold it up to the window, watching as the light plays over the mother. Laugh of like pearl and like smile. A guest passing by admires it, saying, "Daily, I didn't really notice it was missing, but now that it's back, the geta looks like whole, way able." Laugh, you nod, understanding that some repairs restore not just function, but the invisible wholeness that makes something feel complete. Laugh, the geta's storage box had developed a musty smell, a damp odor that clung to the wood even after the geta was removed. Laugh, you set the box on the veranda, its cedar planks warped slightly at the edges so the lid no longer closing properly. Cleaning, Laugh, a storage box, is just like airing out memories, Sister Exachum said. Laugh, uncut, sometimes what's hidden needs attention as much as what's visible. First, you empty the box completely, removing a few stray threads, a dried pressed flower, and a small packet of camphor that had just lost its scent. You brush the interior with a stiff Bristol brush, dislodging dust bunnies that had gathered in the corners, their gray forms breaking apart like ash when disturbed. The first time you skipped this step, the dust just mixed with moisture and created new mold, just making the smell worse. Washing the box requires a solution of salt water and lemon, so the natural ingredients gentle enough for the old cedar. You dip a soft cloth in the mixture, wringing it out until only slightly damp, then wipe every surface, following the whole grain of the wood. The salt draws out moisture, while the lemon leaves a fresh scent, replacing the mustiness with something bright and clean. You avoid soaking the wood, knowing that excess water would just warp it further. Drying the box properly is crucial. You prop it open with a small stick, so positioning it in a shaded spot where it catches a gentle breeze, but not direct sunlight. Sunlight would fade the cedar's natural color, while stagnant air would prevent thorough drying. Laugh, you just turn the box every hour. Laugh, ensuring all surfaces receive equal airflow, a process that takes the better part of a whole day. Once dry, you sand the warped edges lightly with fine sandpaper, smoothing the rough spots where the lid had been catching. The sandpaper makes a soft, rustling sound against the cedar, releasing its familiar fragrance, which mixes with the lingering lemon scent in the air. You brush away the wood dust, just revealing the rich reddish tone of the cedar just beneath the grime. To restore the box's ability to close properly, Laugh, so you apply a thin layer of beeswax to the edges, rubbing it in with a cloth until it melts into the wood. The wax lubricates the contact points and helps the wood expand and contract more evenly with changes in humidity. Maybe you test the lid repeatedly, opening and closing it until it moves smoothly, no longer sticking or just gaps. Finally, you place a new packet of camphor inside, along with a sprig of dried lavender from the garden. The camphor repels insects, while the lavender adds a subtle fragrance that complements the cedar. You just line the bottom with a piece of clean cotton cloth. It's so soft texture, protecting the geta from scratches. Now the box sits on the shelf, its lid closing with a soft sex running. It sets like a pleasant mix of cedar and lavender. You place the repaired get inside, watching how it fits perfectly, as if the box had just been waiting for it. A shaft of sunlight slants through the window, highlighting the box's restored grain, and you think of how even containers need care. Laugh, like just like they hold not just objects, but the stories and time those objects carry. You close the lid gently, knowing both geta and box are ready to preserve each other for years to come. The geta's accompanying cloth bag had torn along the seam, the cotton fabric thinning from years of use, so its drawstring frayed at the ends. You spread on the tatami mat, Laugh, the tear gaping like an open mouth, revealing the faint imprint of the geta's shape, where it had rested for so long. Laugh, mending a cloth bag. It's like patching like a memory holder. Sister Chio said, Laugh, like Unka, its value lies not in beauty, but in the care it provides. First, You turn the bag inside out, examining the tier closely. The fabric is thin but strong. It's weave tight despite the wear. A sign of really good quality. You trim the frayed edges with small scissors, cutting along the line of the weave to prevent further unraveling. The first time you mended a bag, you just skipped this whole step and the whole tier spread within days, making the repair useless.
Selecting thread for mending requires matching both strength and color. Laugh, you choose a spool of unbleached cotton thread. Laugh, so its natural tone blending with the bag's off-white fabric. The thread is thick enough to hold but not so heavy that it pulls on the thin fabric. So a balance you learned by experimenting with different weights. You just thread a needle with a double length, knotting the ends together to create a stronger stitch. Laugh, the mending stitch follows the original seam line, a simple running stitch that mimics the bag's construction. You start sewing a few inches away from the tier, working your way toward it, then continue past the end. Laughs, so reinforcing the fabric beyond the damage. Each stitch is small and even spaced like the beads on a necklace, ensuring the repair distributes tension evenly. Sister Axotune taught you to pull the thread gently but firmly, not too tight to pucker, like the fabric, nor too loose to leave gaps. After closing the tier, you reinforce the seam with a second row of stitching. This time, a backstitch that creates a stronger bond. The backstitch looks like a continuous line from the front, but it's sort of like overlapping threads on the back provide extra strength. You tie off the thread with a secure knot, then weave the end through a few stitches to hide it, leaving no visible ends that might catch or just unravel. The drawstring needs attention too. Laugh. You remove the old one, its fibers worn thin in spots, and replace it with a new length of cotton cord. Laugh, the cord is slightly thicker than the original, so making it easier to grip, but still thin enough to just slide through the bag's casing. You thread it through using a safety pin attached to one end, guiding it carefully through the fabric tunnel without catching or tearing the whole thin material. Once the new cord is in place, you knot both ends, creating small loops that prevent them from slipping back into the casing. You trim the ends at an angle, giving them a neat finish, and just apply a tiny drop of clear glue to the knots to secure them. So a trick learned from watching tailors repair kimono ties. Now, the bag lies flat on the mat. So the tier invisible from a distance, the repair blending with the original fabric like a natural part of its aging. You fold the repaired geta and slip it inside, feeling the bag cradle it gently, just as it did when new. The drawstring pulls closed smoothly, its new cord sliding so easily through the casing. The casing. You hang the bag on its usual hook, and it sways slightly in the breeze, a quiet testament to the idea that even the protectors need protection. Laugh. So laugh, just sort of laugh. Anka, that care is a chain that connects all things. Laugh, the Geta's wooden storage rack had started to wobble. Laugh, so one of its legs has become loose from years of bearing weight, the joints creaking with every slight movement. You propped it against the wall, watching as it leaned to one side like a tired old man. Laugh, repairing a storage rack is like strengthening a foundation. Laugh, like Sister Chaya said, laugh. Uncle, what holds things needs to be held itself. First, you examine the loose leg, finding that the tenon has worn down, no longer fitting snugly into its more ties. The wood around the joint is so smooth from friction, like a sign of slow deterioration rather than sudden damage.
So you remove the leg completely by tapping it gently with a rubber mallet. The sound soft and dull, unlike the sharp crack that would indicate a break.
So the first time you tried to repair a rack without removing the leg, you only fixed the symptom, not the cause, and it wobbled again within a month. You clean the tenon and mortise with a wire brush, removing wood dust and small splinters that have accumulated over time. The brush's stiff bristles reach into the deepest parts of the joint. Preparing it for repair, you blow away the debris, watching as it floats to the floor like tiny snowflakes, revealing the clean wood just like beneath. To rebuild the worn tenon, you mix wood filler with a small amount of water, creating a paste that holds its shape when pressed. You apply it to the tenon with a putty knife, shaping it to match the original form, so just building up the worn areas gradually. The filler needs to be slightly oversized, as it will always shrink when dry. A lesson learned when a previous repair ended up too small. After drying. After letting the filler dry overnight, you sand the tenon with fine sandpaper, shaping it until it fits perfectly into the mortise. Just uncut snug enough to require a gentle tap with the mallet, but not so tight that it risks splitting the wood. You test the fit repeatedly, making small adjustments until the leg stands straight and firm in its joint. So reattaching the leg requires wood glue applied sparingly to both tenon and mortise. You spread it evenly with a small brush, ensuring complete coverage without excess so that would squeeze out and mark the wood surface. You tap the leg into place with the mallet, then clamp it firmly using a wooden clamp padded with cloth to prevent marks. The clamp stays in place for 24 hours. Just allowing the glue to form a really strong bond. Once the glue is dry, you remove the clamp and test the rack by placing a heavy book on each shelf. It stands so firm, no wobble, no creak, just like the solid stability of properly joined wood. You sand any excess glue that seeped out, then apply like a thin coat of wood oil to the entire rack, blending the repaired area with the rest of the wood. Now the rack stands in its usual corner, holding the geta and its cloth bag securely. Its legs straight and true. You run a hand along its edges, feeling like the smooth wood and the solid joints, and just smile. A Geisha passing by admires it, saying, "You a good rack is like a good friend." Sort of like auntie. You don't notice it until it's needed. But its support makes everything else possible. Only nod, understanding that strength often lies in the things that hold us up, quiet and steady in their reliability. The Geta's polishing cloth had become so stiff and dirty, its fibers clogged with old wax and wood, dust no longer able to shine the wood properly. You laid it on a washing stone, the cloth's once soft surface now rough and discolored. Like a meadow turned dry by drought. Restoring like a polishing cloth is like renewing a trusted tool. Like Sister Aixo Chum said, unke, its value grows with use, but only if cared for in return. First, you soak the cloth in a basin of lukewarm water, mixed with a small amount of mild soap made from olive oil. The soap is just gentle enough to clean without damaging the cloth's fibers. Which have softened just over years of use. You just let it soak for the time it takes to complete a full meditation cycle, the water turning a murky gray as dirt and wax dissolve. The first time you used hot water, it just shrank the cloth, making it too small to wrap around your hand properly. Washing the cloth requires gentle squeezing rather than rubbing, which would fray the fibers or cause pilling. You work the soapy water through the fabric in slow circular motions, just focusing on the dirtiest areas where wax has always built up. The water grows darker with each squeeze, releasing decades of accumulated grime. You just rinse the cloth repeatedly in clean water until it runs clear, like a process that takes longer than the washing itself. Drying the cloth is done in the shade, stretched over a bamboo frame to maintain its shape. Direct sunlight would bleach the fabric and make it brittle, while hanging it over a line would create creases that are hard to remove. You smooth out any wrinkles with your hands, ensuring the cloth just dries flat and even like ready to be used again. Once dry, you soften the cloth by rubbing it between your hands, working the fibers until they regain their original suppleness. The cloth feels lighter now, so its texture so soft and fluffy against your skin, like a cloud touched by rain. You fold it neatly, laugh, creating a small pad that fits perfectly in your palm. Laugh, like literally, the same shape it has held for years, molded by the hands that have used it. To prepare it for future use, laugh, you just rub a small amount of beeswax into the cloth's surface, working it into the fibers until only a faint residue remains. Laugh, the wax primes the cloth, laugh, making it ready to polish wood without needing additional treatment. You store it in a small wooden box next to the get's other care tools, where it waits patiently. Laugh, just for its just next use. Now the cloth lies beside the restored get, its clean surface catching the light. You pick it up and run it gently over the wood, feeling the smooth friction that brings out like a soft shot. The geta glows under the cloth's touch, its surface reflecting the room around it like a mirror. A soft breeze carries the scent of the olive oil soap from the cloth, laugh mixing with the wood's aroma, and you think of how even the smallest tools have their own stories. Laugh, like just think of the hands that used them, the objects they cared for, and the patience required to just keep both in good condition. You set the cloth down carefully, knowing it will be ready when the geta needs polishing again. A sort of quiet partner in the ongoing work of care. Like the golden glow of the setting sun spilled over the threshold of the storage room, falling on the brass lock of the camphor wood chest, refracting into tiny fragments of light. Your fingertips just trace the wood grain along the edge of the chest lid. Those rounded curves polished smooth by countless openings and closings, like gentle strokes quietly drawn by time. The geta maintenance tools lay so neatly on a cotton cloth, laugh at silver tips of tweezers catching the evening light, fine pores of sandpaper still holding tiny wood shavings as if retaining the warmth from sanding the geta. Laugh that afternoon. These tools had witnessed your initial clumsiness, so the scratched geta surface from holding sandpaper backward for the first time, the crooked stitches when hammering copper nails. Initially, the amber stains splashed on cotton cloth while mixing tung oil for the first try. They also bore witness to your growth. Laughed like laugh, just like laugh. Anka from needing Sister Ixatakuchun to supervise beside you, to handling moldy geta, souls independently, from being unable to distinguish sandpaper grits to selecting the perfect one by touch alone. Like wind chimes under the eaves. They listen to every step of yours, from awkwardness to proficiency, gradually memorizing your unique rhythm. Night breeze filtered through the bamboo curtain in the corridor, carrying the faint fragrance of cherry blossoms from the courtyard. Laugh. You took one last look at the neatly arranged toolbox. Laugh gently closed the camphor wood chest lid, and the locked tongue clicked shut, just like punctuation, marking the end of today's story. Geta stood quietly in the storage room with copper pieces on their teeth, occasionally reflecting moonlight from outside the window as if blinking. Laugh. In fact, objects never truly remain silent. Laugh like so because they remember all time in their own way. Just as you will always recall every inch of the warm, smooth wood touched by your fingertips during those mornings and evenings with Geta, and just like the stories belonging to you hidden within that wood.